When you were president of Maine Farmland Trust, you launched a robust Buy, Protect, Sell program. What is Buy, Protect, Sell, and why did you begin to do BPS projects in Maine?
Well, Buy, Protect, Sell is an alternative tool for land protection. Generally, when you're a land trust trying to protect land, you work with a landowner who either sells or donates an easement. And that means that it requires that you have a willing landowner. But what happens when there's a piece of property that's about to go on the market, when the landowner is not in a position to consider an easement but has to sell? Buy, Protect, Sell, as the name implies, allows a land trust to buy the property, protect it itself, and then turn around it and resell it. And there's a couple of great things that happen when you do this. One, you can target the property that you would argue is the most vulnerable, the property that's about to go on the market. But the second reason is you then create property that can be provided affordably to incoming farmers. And we launched this program in Maine precisely to serve those two goals. We were missing out on protecting key properties, that which was the most vulnerable, and we had a real goal of helping farmers, both existing farmers who maybe needed to expand or acquire property that they leased and was critical to their operation, or new farmers who were trying to enter the field.
Where did the idea of BPS come from?
Well, it's not a new concept. When we launched the program in Maine in 2008, in Vermont they were doing it. I think there were some land trusts in Pennsylvania that were doing it. Our model, though, came from one of our board members, a farmer who a decade earlier had purchased some properties himself and then worked with a local land trust to protect them, and then turned around and sold those properties to young farmers in the area. So that's where we got the idea. So we weren't the first, we can't take credit for it, but we did create what ended up being, I think, one of the biggest programs in the country. During the last 6 years that I was at Maine Farmland Trust, we did about 30 deals, and that work continues. And we also had a hand in spreading the concept to other land trusts around the country.
What challenges did you encounter? What lessons did you learn?
Well, the biggest challenge is really making the numbers work. I used to joke with my board that Buy, Protect, Sell was the buy high, sell low program, and that's an accurate way of describing it. So there's a huge challenge in purchasing a property that you may be spending 2 times, 3 times, 5 times more on purchasing it than you can ultimately turn around and resell it for. So that's critical, and you need a plan from the beginning on how you're going to do that. So one of the lessons learned is that you need to scrutinize each project very carefully and come up with a financial plan that will work for it. Another lesson which relates to that is the need to sort of take a portfolio approach. Some projects are going to lose money. Some projects are going to maybe make a little money. You have to look at it as an overall portfolio with the goal that overall we're going to break even on this. If you focus just on individual projects and one goes bad, you think you've failed, but you haven't. The goal, again, is ultimately to protect the land and make it affordable for the next generation of farmers. If that costs you a little bit of money, that's okay, but you have to overall have a financial viability for the program so you can continue to do it.
How and from where did you raise the needed funds?
We raised money in many different ways, and again, that's sort of part of how this stuff works. The way I've always thought about Buy, Protect, Sell is with 2 different funding streams. First, you need money in order to buy the property. And then you also need money to cover the difference in costs between what you pay for it and what you might have to invest in it while you own it and what you ultimately sell it for. And those two sort of buckets of expenses are interrelated, right? Because if you, for instance, pay interest on money that you're using to buy the farms, that adds to the overall cost. But I really like to think of them separately. And when you look at the first bucket of the capital costs for a project, we were really lucky in Maine. We had a lot of socially conscious investors who lent us money at very low rates. And then we filled in the rest where needed with either bank loans or with some of our own capital. On filling the gap between what we pay for a property and spend on it and what we bring in when we sell it, most of the cost there, not all, but most of the cost there is the cost of the easement itself. So government sources of funding for easements is one answer. The other answer is we would do project-specific fundraising to try to fill that gap. Get people in a community who are excited about a deal to put in some money to see this property that they cared about permanently protected. But we couldn't do that always, and there wasn't government funding available always. So we also raised general philanthropic money, grant funding and the like, to help pay for general operating costs for the program and to then target those worthy projects that we wanted to do, but nonetheless we'd never be able to find easement-specific funding from government or private sources for.
Didn't the 2018 Farm Bill make it possible to use federal funds for BPS deals?
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the great accomplishments of the 2018 Farm Bill. Prior to that, I just mentioned how government funding for easements is a critical piece of this, but the federal funding was not available for BPS projects, at least not directly. So that was put forward in the 2018 Farm Bill. It's a great success. That was 2 years ago, but it takes a while to promulgate rules, and this is a new area for NRCS. So they have been in discussions with us and others about how to do this well. I can say that the leadership at NRCS is very excited about this new authority, and I think they're very close to issuing rules on it. And when they do, we will be sharing that information with you.
Where does BPS fit among different tools in the Farmland Protection Toolbox?
Well, BPS, in my mind, is a critical tool because it allows you to do some things that you can't do otherwise. One of the key things that you can do with BPS is you can target farmland, as I mentioned earlier, where there isn't a landowner who's ready to work with you on an easement. So it opens up a whole different set of projects that have never been available before. And as I also mentioned earlier, it also gives you that opportunity to target that most vulnerable land, the land that's about to go on the market. The second reason the tool is very powerful is because what it can do to open up opportunities for farmers to buy land at affordable costs. Those of us in the land protection business always think every land protection deal will ultimately result in farmland changing hands at more affordable costs. But that might be years, it might be decades before a farmer who you worked with an easement on their property turns around and sells it or passes it along to their children or whatever. But with a BPS project, that happens almost immediately. So it's a very powerful tool.
I hear you were surprised when you learned that the actual term, buy, protect, sell, was being incorporated into the Farm Bill. Tell me about that.
Well, it's a little bit embarrassing in a way. I was the new president of AFT, and we were gearing up for our involvement with the 2018 Farm Bill. And a lot of my energy was devoted elsewhere. I had good staff working on the Farm Bill. I didn't need to pay a lot of attention to it. And I didn't even realize that AFT was working with a group of land trusts to advance buy, protect, sell in the Farm Bill, or that they were using that term, buy, protect, sell. And the reason that's funny is because I coined that term. And I used to go around in Maine and talk about this great program that we had with a terrible name. And I used to say, well, it might be a bad name, but at least it's descriptive because it says that we buy the land, we protect it, and then we sell it again. And I guess everybody hopes that they'll be remembered for something professionally, and maybe for me, this is it. Now I have this term that I coined, memorialized in the federal Farm Bill. I just wish I had come up with a better name before it ended up in federal legislation.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this information.
Thank you.